and see if it works. Okay. Excellent connection we have. I'm gonna find headphones. So, I mean, I guess we could pause streaming to shoot the shit because this is being recorded. Cool. Headphoning. It's just you, Matt, at this juncture.
It's just me. It's just
me.
me.
I bet I know how to fix it. Welcome, listeners. All of our subscribers on the YouTube who are clearly super. I just add another scene to OBS. I betcha. Boom. I'm on another NDI source. Okay, cool. Cool. Boom. Source name. Local. Oh, Matt, I'm a freaking genius, yo. Now we're both on. Isn't that great?
Wow. Great.
Here we are. No, this is wrong. Turn sign on. That's important. Look at me. I can be bishop of the ELCA now.
Because you have a
I
neon
turned it
sign.
on just like the bishop did. So.
Wow, I wish I had a neon sign. I haven't seen that up yet.
Were you in the sanctuary, Matt?
I'm in the sanctuary. I'm sitting at the
That's
piano.
what
I have a stack of books propped up on the piano. Don't tell my musician. The organ that we never use is behind me. And the Hammond organ is to my left. We do use that one. It's
Anything
pretty
on fire over there?
I don't know how to use it. No, not yet. We did light it on fire once.
I recall we had a whole
episode
episode about
about
burning the church down.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. I don't know if there was something like, I don't know if it was Pentecost or what, but it was pretty great. It's like end of worship. Boom. Incredible.
Love it.
Oh, the days when we could gather for worship in this little space.
Those
It'll be a long time.
were the days. Here we go. Let's see if anybody jumps on this. Live streaming.
So I keep talking.
If you want, I mean, we have one person who's watching right now.
Hey, one person. Yeah, so we're not gathering in the sanctuary right now. We are having our first COVID-19 reopening task force meeting. On Sunday. Our small task force. They're a great group of people. It feels like a good idea to like have a task force and meet, but currently we are not legally allowed to gather, and I cannot foresee that happening for some time to come. So
That's
not totally sure what we're going to talk about, but it feels like we should have a team, and then we won't be caught flat-footed. So I don't know. We'll see. So there's that.
That's something. All right. We have two viewers. Who are averaging 77 seconds of viewing. So that's
awesome.
Great. That's great.
Hey, 2 viewers. I'm used to talking to myself, and I always try to say that like Ian Malcolm in the original Jurassic Park, where he's left in the car talking to himself. That's chaos theory, because the last 2 Sundays at our Zoom church, the church suggested to me, and I listened to my people's act. They suggested to me we would like to have more interaction during the service, so maybe we could take advantage of breakout rooms at some point. Which is great. So we do randomized breakout rooms, like at the end of the sermon, to talk about whatever I talked about. Except the problem is that then I am left in the main room by myself while we're streaming to Facebook Live. So then it's just me and no one else talking to the Facebook universe. And so I have to fill 4 minutes of time that I've not prepared anything for, because I've already preached my sermon. So now I'm just like talking about the sermon that I just preached for 4 minutes. It's pretty great. It's a little improv morning with Pastor.
That's pretty fun. That's pretty fun. We're down to one. That didn't work for us. We are down.
So clearly I'm not very good at it.
2 minutes ago, you lost us a viewer, Matt. You look professional. You got collared shirt on and stuff.
collared shirt on. I dressed up to move furniture today because this seemed like an appropriate outfit for moving furniture.
It's a good outfit.
Giant file cabinets that are insanely, even emptied file cabinets, insanely heavy.
Yeah.
Maybe because they're from the 70s and everything was heavy in the 70s. I don't know.
Man, I've been reading the law. I've been reading the law. In the 70s, pretty heavy.
Right? Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh! Did you get to any murders yet?
I've not. I've just completed.
Where am I?
I'm in the chapter on 1969.
Yeah, it's pretty chill year in America.
I spent plenty of time romanticizing 1969, and that must have really been a time. But I imagine that in the future, Matt, we'll be like 2020 though, huh? Wow.
What would it have been like? What must that have been like? I mean, it's things are happening. We had a worship planning meeting last night. We spent the first 20 minutes talking about the vice presidential selection. She's from California.
About Mike Pence.
Woman of color.
Oh, the other one.
Kamala Harris, man. Kamala Harris, California. I do a lot of complaining that America does not pay enough attention
to California. Yeah.
We have 20% of the population. 20% of America's population lives in California. That's pretty.
It is remarkable how much how some people perceive California as oversaturated in the media. But also 1/5 of all Americans live in California. So
yeah,
that's kind of important.
I mean, I think the thing that I object to all the time is like when we have our primaries, and we always start in Iowa, and so we're appealing to this white rural population. My grandparents were from Iowa. I love Iowa. Love spending time there. Just feels
that's
like
a good time.
That's a good time. Like, here's America, you guys, Iowa, and then we're supposed to go from there to the rest of the country. Maybe Los Angeles, America. I mean, you just get a very different, right? Like California, America, which does include a whole Iowa within it, as you know.
Live there,
right? Like we've got. So
California puts agricultural production to shame.
Right. So I was like, yeah, finally some California, and then I realized that now we have the vice presidential nominee. Also, the Speaker of the House is from California.
I suppose.
I guess it's a pretty powerful.
I could see that. Yeah.
Karen Bass was also in the running. Also be vice president. She's our representative where we live.
That is exciting. That is exciting.
So I guess California does get some attention.
Well, that's good. It's about time.
It's a bit of time. But still, we're super weighted on the East Coast for, I don't know, weirdly.
It's true, man. I'm sure I had a.
Do you recall? Can I stay on this topic for just one more minute?
Oh, please.
I can't remember at the moment, but it makes me wonder, since this is the Vinyl Preacher. Do you remember when they did like the playlists for all of their presidential candidates? I feel like Kamala had a pretty good playlist. I feel like she had one of the better ones.
I bet she did. I'm sure it's better than Biden's.
Yeah, I don't know if she.
Bon Jovi, Journey.
I mean, I can't really complain because I think Biden's probably
a lot of Bruce,
heavy amount of Springsteen, and I would like, but I think I don't know whether Kamala actually listens to all of that, but she had a pretty good sense of like. Yeah, it was good. It was a good
Trump's playlist. Trump's playlist would have been all Milli Vanilli. I was confused earlier this week, Matt. It turns out that my personally cultivated social media experience this disconnected from my actual human realities. So my Twitter my Twitter people happen to all be really into old school wrestling, like WWE style wrestling. I am not. But evidently the old school wrestler died. And the hashtag was going around. And there are like some decent think pieces on it. He was black man, and like kind of that whole glow sort of like it was super had to portray these super racist stereotypes and stuff. But his name was Kamala. And so with hashtag RIP Kamala, and I was like, oh no, what happened? Is she out of the running?
Like what
I was very confused. I was very confused. But I wasn't. So.
Yeah. That's a confusing news week.
It was really tough for me. Personally. But you want to record a podcast now?
Sure. I guess we can.
We're recording this.
We haven't started already. Should we do the intro halfway through?
We should.
Like, I've never dropped the beat at the end of a song. Incredible.
Don't waste podcast material, man.
Welcome to the Final Preacher, your weekly podcast where we talk about the Bible, make a playlist, and I'm Caleb Baster at St. Mark's Lutheran Church in Los Angeles, California.
And I'm Zach Pierce. I'm pastor ministry, the University of Colorado, which is a university that is now, as you listen to this podcast, fully in session. Everything's fine. Nothing's gone wrong at all. The students are really enjoying their experience on campus, as we learned a couple weeks ago. They're stopping by the dining halls, which is they can't sit down. In. It's only grab and go. So they can go to the dining hall, pick up, take it back to their room, eat it by themselves, because all common areas are now closed, obviously. So it's good. It's good, man. Everything's going great.
Good. That sounds sane.
Yeah, perfectly fine.
USC still closed. Although then there was a communication from the state of California that universities could reopen, and then they had to send another email saying we're still closed, but we'll take this under consideration. So we'll see. Who knows?
Fantastic, man. I have been having. I will work myself up. Full disclosure with how our linear experience with time works. School's not in session yet, but I am having meetings with colleagues and stuff, and in between these meetings, I'll kind of like work myself up and like be like, oh no, okay, I think this is gonna work. We're gonna do like the small groups are gonna be like crack-a-lackin'. We're gonna do an empanada food truck our first Tuesday night, like on the lawn. We're gonna have space tables, and I bought an outdoor movie projector, Matt, because I need one for home use and professional use, and an outdoor screen, because we're gonna do like, that's gonna be our deal. And you're like, okay, I can see how this will work. I'm gonna meet with my student leaders, and then like I check in with people who are actually like, connected with the university and stuff. And the Zooms become doom Zooms pretty quickly. Like, this is not going to work at all, right? Yeah, like, no, even if it works, it's not going to be fun at all. Like, this is... And then we're like, oh, yeah, and if they cancel... Like, so here's what I'm hearing, Matt. And this has been a really interesting experience, and it's a really interesting experience right now as someone who works at the university, but definitely not for, but I don't want to, like, burn down bridges and stuff either, because... having connections and relationships on the university is an important part of my job, and I'm here to support faculty and staff in addition to students. But if you were to ask me straight up if I thought this is a good idea, I'd go with no, right? I don't think this is a good idea. So what do I do? How do I do it? I don't know, man. I've lost my complete train of thought there. I got so into the doom. Oh, here's the thing. Yeah. Right? So, okay. Here's the scoop, Matt. The scoop is that most people I talk to expect that we will have in-person learning for 3 to 4 weeks. For a number of reasons. Just like it'll take that long for us to find out that something's gone horribly wrong, because it's not like we can turn tests around real quick. Also, it happens to be when the last day to get your fees in is. So semester will be paid for at that point. But here's the wild thing. As I talk to our students, another bizarre part of college town stuff, I don't know if this is the case where in LA, because it's a different kind of deal, but you need to sign a lease at the latest in January of the year you hope to live in that place in the fall. right?
Yeah.
So we've got students who signed leases for this year in like December or November. So you've had this lease forever. You've got a place you're going to pay for. You're tired of living with your parents' house. All the students I'm talking to, whether they're going to be taking classes in person or coming back to town to live in the apartments, to do that whole thing. So even we get 3 or 4 weeks in and we cancel in-person classes, I'm hearing they're not going to kick students out of dorms because they didn't kick students out of dorms last time. And there are contracts involved in dorm life. And all of the off-campus students are just going to be here anyway. So it's great.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, I mean, yeah, LA is different, but this immediate neighborhood, that was part of USC's communications, was that like local landlords, if you've already signed a lease, there's nothing they can do. Like there's nothing the university can do. They're like, and landlords are like, well, we have bills to pay too, so you're stuck.
It's insane.
It's like, and it's a microcosm of like what everyone else is facing too. I mean, people are terrified that across the city there's just gonna be mass evictions because we've put the burden on tenants rather than like figuring out how to address this problem.
At least we can count on the federal government coming in to help stabilize the situation and protect the vulnerable, right?
Right.
They're good at that.
Right. Yeah, it's insane. So, yeah, pretty calm time. Slow news day.
Pretty chill.
Just like these texts.
Just like these super chill texts. It's summertime and the lectionary is chill, man.
I mean, I do feel like in this moment, like a year ago,
in these extraordinary times, unprecedented. Excuse me, that's the word. That's the adjective we're looking for here.
You could kind of, in other years, maybe cast about for sermon topics. Nope, it's pretty clear. Here's what we're going to talk about. Here's what any of us are dealing with. So, well, we've sadly finished a summer of Genesis.
Which really gets tied up so neatly, Matt. I continue to like be amazed at like immediately it is like the biggest ball of yarn ever, frayed edges everywhere, and then they're like, and Joseph and his brothers reconciled. Thanks for coming. This has been a great story. I really appreciate you all.
Yeah, it's great. End of season 1, or really like, I guess if it was an HBO TV series, it'd be like each of the seasons would probably be like, you'd probably have like Abraham, and you'd have like your Jacob season, maybe your Joseph season, and now this is like a spin-off show.
Spin-off. It is. Matt, before we get to the text, though,
this is Better Call Saul.
There's something really important we need to talk about on this show that's culturally relevant, and you should probably spend most of your time preaching on this week. And
don't talk about Gary Mason.
One of our active listeners right now, one of our 6, we're streaming this week. So one of the folks I know listening, because he gave us some advice in the middle of the show, Adam White, our colleague at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, from whom I stole some great creative content recently, is also a fellow watcher. Matt, I've been getting into Netflix series called Warrior Nun.
That's not
it's a real completely thing. A real thing, and it is, I want to be really clear, so bad, right? And you may ask yourself, what could be bad about a show that takes nuns, a topic everybody's typically super intrigued with, and makes them warriors? And it's a misnomer, because I'm going to nitpick on a couple things, but I want to be really clear that the acting is really, really bad. Right? The lines that are written for people, like it is almost to the level of The Room, which I was forced against my will to watch a couple weekends ago. It's real bad. The main character is actually a pretty good actor, I think, but outside of her, like there are some real dry lines that are just kind of said in a room that 2 people happen to be in. It's not a conversation. But I have a couple of issues that I'd like to address. I'm in, by the way. I haven't finished. No spoilers. The Vinyl Spouse and I, we're working our way through. I'm super invested. Here's the deal, Matt. I'm going to set it up for you a little bit, right? There's this like magic halo that has a lot of power, and you stick it in somebody's back, and they become like a superhero that's able to defeat demons and stuff that are real. And there's a super cringy, ongoing like faith science debate that sets up stupid dialectical. So that's going on. So that's great. And so they're trying to hide the halo from these demonic forces, what appear to be demonic forces. We don't know for sure yet. And it gets stuck in a recently deceased non-nun who comes back to life, was a quadriplegic, and is now having to wrestle with being resurrected, having full use of their body, superpowers, and now also having, like, by force becoming a warrior nun, which is not where I think she thought her afterlife would go. It's great. Here's my nitpicks, though, okay? You don't need to change anything up to now. Up to now, bad acting, I'm in, right? Super ridiculous plotline, fully invested. A really super reductionist faith science thing, I'm here for it. But here's my issues. The warrior nuns are part of a sect, an order called the Order of the Cruciform Sword, because they have a sword made out of a special material called divinium. That has special powers over demon.
Divinium?
Yeah. It introduces divinium.
Wow.
The halo, it turns out, not made out of divinium, but an even more special sort of metal not from this world. Here's my issue, Matt. A sword, by its nature, is already cruciform. Show me an uncruciform sword. That's like the least imaginative... At least... imaginative name for a really badass order of nuns is the Order of the Cruciform Sword. It's like the Order of the Cross-Shaped Cross. Like, it's the dumbest name ever, man.
Yeah, man. So I'm not a swordsman. But I wonder if you could tell, like, so there's a handle, and then there's a blade, and then there's the part that makes it cruciform, right? Now, is that to, like, protect your hand?
I believe it's the hilt.
Is that what that's for?
Is what that is. Yeah.
What, the handle or the part that, like...
I believe it's the protectee part.
So it's a protecting
Yeah.
part.
I mean, like, so imagine your cinematic sword fight. The sword's like cross. It would be easy enough just to come down and cut your hand off. But the hilt helps you.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, because I initially thought lightsabers, not often cruciform. So are they just particularly dangerous?
Yeah, I think a lightsaber is a real bad idea, personally.
I
would like to say the university has announced that all freshmen will be issued a real live lightsaber.
I mean, I'm just because there is one cruciform lightsaber. Kylo Ren decides to put,
kind of,
but it's not actually protective because it is also a blade. So it seems like
we got to talk to the geek god Tahina, maybe like Brian Bennett, Will Rose. We got to get to the bottom of this. I'm intrigued by just the physics of lightsabers' ability to like stop each other.
Sure,
right?
Yeah.
Like that's really something. Right. But I'm not done yet, Matt, with my rant on Warrior Nun and my issues with it.
Okay.
Item number 2 of things that need to be changed in the Order of the Cruciform Nun is that the show is called Warrior Nuns, and they call themselves, well, I think just the person with the halo, because it gets passed down from generation to generation, is called the Warrior Nun. Matt, I have examined their training, because if this show is anything, it's nothing but... this roving camera shot, this Ken Burns effect of nuns training in a cathedral. That's all it is. But clearly they're ninjas, okay? They're ninja nuns. They're not we know what warriors look like, okay? And they're training. One of the nuns gets transferred against her will to a different order and has to go to the armory to turn in her weapons. What are the first weapons she puts down on the table to return? Ninja stars. These are ninja nuns.
What?
They dress like That's also one of my favorite parts. Their costumes are just like these super like ninja like nun habit things. And they just walk around during broad daylight. They're the secret sect. But all around, and it's in Spain, which is fantastic. The accent work in this show is just dyslexic, like an ADHD. Like there are some characters who have like a legitimate Spanish accent, and then there's someone who literally is from the American South and has a really convoluted backstory for why they're there. But they talk like it. But they walk around in plain daylight with like divinium swords and stuff. And they're like, we are. I mean, and they create great violence, right? With like, they're the least inconspicuous order of secret warrior nuns that you could imagine. It's beautiful, Matt. You got to check it out. But those are my 2 issues with the show.
Okay. Gotcha. That was a good episode of What's on TV.
That's right. Thanks. Bye.
Check it out.
Netflix, you know. If you're already paying your $13, you get to watch it.
Fantastic.
So, Matt, we are in the spin-off series here, which would be like the warrior deacon. The Ninja Deacon. That's what they would call it, because they should have called the first show Ninja Deacon. Here, as we start, we skip the first 7 verses, but basically the beginning of Exodus.
Mm-hmm. It's so good. It's just, it's so good. I mean, the first line, now a new king arose over Egypt, who did not know so Joseph.
No matter how many times I hear it, it's so good.
It's so good. I mean, it's so good. And you could imagine it as like a voiceover. Like it's so cinematic. It's incredible.
I could just see Charlton Heston.
Yeah.
Wait.
And then and this new king, hard to relate to though, because this has never again happened in human history, where he says, "Look, these people are more numerous and more than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase, and in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." So they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. They built supply cities, Pithom and Ramses for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians became ruthless in imposing tasks on the Israelites. They made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick, and in every kind of field labor. They were ruthless in all the tasks that they imposed on them.
Super
so
chill.
Right there, stage is set. Super chill. Stage is set. You can imagine that montage, and oh my gosh. It has me thinking too. I mean, this is. So I started reading, since I'm married to a historian. I was told to read the new Isabel Wilkerson book, Caste, where she argues that America has had a caste system from the beginning. It's a really good case with some really amazing. I mean, some of it is stuff that ground that's been covered in other books, but the tidbit that I pulled out so far is that the Nazis actually studied the American caste system and thought it was a little bit too extreme. Which is a little like the lengths that America went to like maintain its caste system. Nazis were like, they don't really do that though, do they? They don't actually, which is crazy. Absolutely insane. We're laughing because it's awful.
That's correct.
The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah. Now this is crucial, right? Because so far the king has not been named. This is just like the president, but it doesn't tell us president who. It's just king, new Pharaoh. Okay. This king of Egypt says to the Hebrew midwives, and then the Hebrew midwives are named. First people to be named in this story. Shiphrah and the other Puah. And he says to them, when you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, she shall live. But the midwives feared God, and they did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them. But they let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, why have you done this and allowed the boys to live? And the midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. Incredible.
Vigorous women, man.
What? Right? What a line. Too fast, too strong. What can we do? What can we do?
Whole new, it's a completely different Too Fast, Too Furious.
I know.
It's still all about family.
And this, like, it is like, again, like it's meant, we were talking about this, and I did a couple different Bible studies of this recently, and we were talking about how like this is meant to be funny. It's like humor in the midst of the horror, and it's one of the ways of dealing with the horror, I think, and of responding to it. But I think it's meant to be that way. Like this is insane. So a couple of things that I noticed here, right? So like, first of all, they don't initially say no to Pharaoh. They don't say anything to him. They just don't do it. And calls them in. It's not like what they tell him is not actually true, right? Because it says they didn't do as the king of Egypt commanded them. The agency, the story, the narrative puts the agency in these midwives' hands, right? But they give him a response which plays into his fears. Right? I mean, that's what he's afraid of, is that they're going to be too vigorous and they're too strong. It's like, you were right, Pharaoh. You were right. They're too strong. Like, there's nothing we can. It's just like, it's incredible. And then the other thing that was brought up in one of my Bible studies is they're talking about, like, we're trying to talk about like parallels in history, like where else have you seen people engage acts of civil disobedience? And somebody brought up Rosa Parks, right, which is a story that we've all heard many times, but sometimes the story that gets told is that she says, "Well, I was just tired," right? Like, I was just tired that day, and that was the story that was like told in the Bible study. And I said, "Well, like, we know that's not actually true, right? That like there was this whole strategy." And that even initially they were going to have somebody else be the person that did what she did. And they thought, well, that person was not going to be as sympathetic. So they chose Rosa Parks because she was going to be the most sympathetic. There was a whole plan of action, right? And then what she says publicly is something a little bit, not quite like it's a little bit different, right? But it's a strategic verbal response that she gives. And that is actually not unlike the midwives here, right? Where they have a particular action that they take, and then the actual thing they say out loud is creative and a little bit different, right? So it's really amazing.
Matt, I would like to
the story continues. So
just to let our listeners know that this episode is brought to you by Bed Bath and Beyond. If you're in need of a birth stool, Bed Bath and Beyond has a wide variety of options, and it's in the Beyond section.
We definitely registered for one, but then what do you do afterwards?
And you don't want to give it away.
You don't want to give it away.
It's like a car seat.
It's tough. It's tough. It's like a car seat. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. So actually, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, Pharaoh. They did multiply and become very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every boy that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile, but you shall let every girl live. So it didn't work with the midwives, so Pharaoh goes to all the people, and he says, here's
He was also unfamiliar with Nirvana's
executive decree.
Because Baby Swim. We all know that because of that album cover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yep. Now, a man from the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. And the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine baby, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and plastered it with bitumen and pitch. And she put the child in it and placed it among the reeds on the bank of the river. And his sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. We just did this story in Sunday school, and my kids, who are 3 years old, were like, in the picture, like, so the mommy looks sad and the baby looks surprised. Why is that? I had to figure out how to explain that. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her attendants walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid to bring it. Oh, moment of tension here. What is going to happen? When she opened it, she sees the child. Oh no, she sees the child. He was crying and she took pity on him. This must be one of the Hebrews' children. She knows it's one of the Hebrews' children, she said. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, yes. And so the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed it. Amazing. Moses' mother paid to raise her own child. Amazing. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and she took him as her son. She named him Moses because, she said, I drew him out of the water.
Whew.
Word of God, word of life.
Do you know, Matt, what Moses' name Moses would have been, the name Moses would have had if Moses had been born a girl? Brandy.
What?
Yep.
Brandy.
You're a fine girl. A fine baby. Get it? Brandy, you're a fine girl. What a good wife you would be.
Good. Yeah. Yeah.
The thing that I appreciate about this story is that this is the last instance you can find in the Bible where a ruler says we should kill all the male babies. And they it doesn't work here, and they're like, it's just not an effective strategy, so we're not going to employ it anymore. So that's helpful. That's a good that we get it out of the way and we don't have to deal with this anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. I mean, if you ever needed a reason to see that these stories are, I don't know, what is the word? They repeat in history. But here's the blueprint. Here's what it looks like. But it's the blueprint not only for the Pharaoh, not only for the powerful person in charge, but also for how God works to undo that, which is really just extraordinary, right? God could you can imagine some story where the powerful deity just smacks down that ruler, smites the ruler, right? You could imagine that. It's not quite what happens here. There'll be a little bit of smiting later with the plagues, but even that is a very creative smiting. I mean, it's really interesting that God works up from underground here, right? With who we would think would be the least powerful people.
Hold on a second.
In that given situation. That is who God begins to work through.
Okay. Remember that next week. Remember it.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Oh.
But I just think it's so. I mean, obviously, there's so much good stuff here that we could talk about. Again, underground, which you're gonna somehow call me on next week. But the relationship of the different people, the relationship of power in this story is incredible. The fact that there are 5 women who are especially important, that there's this powerful male ruler. But it's really these 5 women that steal the show, from these 2 midwives to Moses' mother, and then his sister, and then Pharaoh's daughter. I mean, it's such a subversive story in that way. And then the other thing that really strikes me about it is that, again, it's not this direct smiting of Pharaoh just yet, but that it's almost like Pharaoh, the tables get turned on Pharaoh in these ways that Pharaoh doesn't even realize yet. The fact that Pharaoh is going to care for the child that eventually is going to undo his kingdom, right? Pharaoh's house is taking care of this child and paying his mother to take care of her. It's incredible.
It's got a lot of connections to next week's gospel when Jesus says, those who want to gain their life must lose it. Those who lose their life will gain it. Kind of a thing. So if you wanted to kind of key in on giving up your child in order to receive, in order to receive your child, right? To get to be the mother, required giving it away.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and we talked last. I've got my notes from 3 years ago where we talked about that. Literally giving away into the water, which has no sacramental baptismal imagery whatsoever that we could tell. But it's there. I'm struck too by like there's also something here about like as we continue to move into next week and into this Exodus story in the weeks to come, that like there's also a discernment of like what season you're in. Like there's always a Pharaoh in some way, but are we in the season of protecting the next generation and organizing under Pharaoh's nose? Or are we in the season of direct confrontation of Pharaoh? That's not what happens here yet, right? The midwives aren't really directly confronting Pharaoh. They're undermining him in some really subversive ways, but it's not direct confrontation yet. There will be a moment for that, but that's not the season they're in yet. And so there is left this, I can imagine some sermon about like the discernment of seasons and how you discern what God is calling you to do now. And that can look different in different seasons. Even if the direction, God's movement is always in the same direction, the move in this moment might look different. I think I don't know. I think it's relevant.
I think it is relevant also, Matt. That's a good, one of the goals of this podcast is to be relevant. That's one of our aims. And we did it, Matt. You did it. I think we found a relevant interpretation of this text. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much mystagogical things to do with the water and Moses being drawn out of the water. There are a number of excellent literary sorts of phrases, right? The king who did not know Joseph, and naming Moses because I drew him out of the water. There's just a lot to. If anything, there's too much here, and perhaps the preacher's task is to like, how do I take all of this, and find one thing to preach on, is perhaps the challenge. Yeah. I mean, we haven't even talked about Pharaoh's daughter. Is an insurrectionist? Right. Is that what this is?
Yeah, like there's so many different ways to read her, I think, right? Like, yeah, is she already a radical? Is she already an insurrectionist? Is she on a knife's edge in the story where like she kind of takes pity and then does Moses' sister kind of like tip her over the edge? Like, is she being manipulated? Like, you could read her. There's a lot of different ways you could play this character. But yeah.
One of the images of the kingdom that I always find really helpful is especially when you're doing summertime gospel stuff, is the kind of image of like weeds growing up in the cracks of like concrete and stuff. And that's certainly an image that maybe I wouldn't go with preaching wise because there's so much imagery in the story already, but that comes to my mind of this weed is already in the house of Pharaoh. And like, I mean, I don't know if I would do it. I've got to think through it a little bit more, but like the kind of like disease is already there, is in the body, using it against itself. I don't know if I'd make that illusion or not, but I think it's something to think about. I'm not preaching this week, so
yeah.
y'all can figure this out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like, I think that's part of what the story invites us to do, right? Like, it'd be very easy, like, if you stopped at verse 14, this looks pretty hopeless, right? But you keep reading and you begin to see the weeds growing through the cracks, that God is still at work in the midst of this. Good stuff.
Yep. Matt, we have a super predictable gospel reading to pair with this. Last week, as you recall, Peter was trying to walk. Is that last week? No. 2 weeks ago, Peter was trying to walk on water. Didn't work out for him, and Jesus said to him, "You have so little faith." That the next week, Jesus insults a Gentile woman, Pharaoh's daughter, and the woman's response has Jesus saying, "Oh, actually, you have great faith. This is great." So Peter sucks and the Syrophoenician woman's awesome. And so, of course, the outcome of that is when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And he said, "Some say John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." But he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, you are rocky. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and some of the things you bind on... whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." And then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Peter's roller coaster ride is just getting started, Matt. Insulted, drowning. Now the rock, which does sink, I guess, if you think about it, is the foundation of the church. What a ride here for our friend Peter.
What a ride. What a ride indeed.
Oh, so many places to go here. I do think it's important. We've got about 4 readings in a row here that really focus on Peter. And I think you could pick one of them to be like, hey, here's the foundation of the church, is this guy who gets it real wrong a lot. Spoilers next week. So that's a sermon for sure that's there. But here's the thing that's in my craw this week, Matt. This is the first time that the word ecclesia, which is church, gets used in the New Testament, in Matthew, which is the only gospel that mentions the word church. This
what?
Is it.
Here?
You, on this rock, I will build my church. So I did my word study this week. I did my word study real sturdy on church, ecclesia. And it is a compound word, Matt. It comes from ek and kaleo, which means out from, and then to call out from. And I'd like to start podcast beef right now with super famous church blogger Carrie Nieuwhof. If you've surely seen the Carrie Nieuwhof stuff floating around the internet.
Oh yeah, the 5 things
listicle
that you're doing wrong.
If you need a list to tell you most of the time what you're doing wrong, or to make you feel superior to other churches who are not doing the things that you are doing, Carrie Nieuwhof is here to validate you. And he gets super shared in clergy circles, so I see his headlines all the time. Occasionally they're good enough that I click on it, and then I'm routinely disappointed. I'm always like, oh, it's just a listicle, and okay, not for me. Mm-hmm. His thing was this week. One of the article I saw was 5 things that churches who aren't going to survive the pandemic are doing wrong, which often is one of his favorite.
And then you want to click on it because now immediately I think, what are they? Even though I know, I don't care. What do you think? I want to know.
And
what
surprise, Matt, they were really reductive. What I love about Carrie is his ability to really engage nuance. But one of them that got under my craw, and I read it right before I did kind of prep for the podcast, was churches that focused on returning to the building are churches that are going to fail, because instead of focusing on the church and here's the thing I want to emphasize, because it's bothered me for years, Matt, and I'm starting to put some words together to figure out why it's bothering me and what my critique is of it. But it's worrying about church and the article is always there, the home. Right? Churches don't need buildings. We need to focus on the life of the church in the home. Okay? And I got a lot of issues with that, right? But one of them is going to go with this introduction of the church here, which means to call out from. And perhaps you could read Carrie's article and you'd say to yourself, well, I could preach this. And we'd go do a whole kind of sermon into what is the church? And the church, God is calling us out from, right? That's literally what the church means, the walls of the church. But Matt, that's not at all what the word meant at the time, right? The church is a gathering of people being called out literally from their homes. The Bible, the New Testament, the ancient Near East, the Bible is preoccupied with tearing down the walls of the home. Because the home was the source of all these blood feuds. That your loyalty was you were much more loyal to the life, the community that was inside of the walls of the home than it was to the greater good, and you felt no social obligation to care for the outsider. So I'm pretty critical and skeptical of a church that says, no, we don't need to worry about a church building. Which I get the sentiment where that comes from. I hear that, but the place we're going is not the home. We're not retreating to the home, okay? Because that's where this whole thing started. The church, the church that's in the Bible is a calling out from those defensive, self-defensive homes, because it makes all of these assumptions about nuclear families. Do you know what, Matt? The last place I want to be right now is the home. It's the place I've been sentenced to be. It is not a place of serenity or renewal or any of that kind of bullshit, right? I have to be my kid's teacher now. Do I have to be their pastor too? What? No, okay. That's not my job.
Oh, incredible! What a hot take.
And it makes the assumption that your home life is a positive, nurturing environment, which we know is not the case for, if not a majority, a significant minority of people don't have healthy, positive, constructive home lives. And so to push that extra work on top of people is super privileged position to take. That's what I want to say. It is a very privileged thing to say. We don't need church buildings because we got to worry about church in the home. Which, I mean, I'm starting to bump up against Rich Milheim and stuff, but. Because I've never loved his stuff, and I think this is helping me understand some of my discomfort.
Kill Sunday school.
Just do Sunday school in the home. The home.
Oh gosh. Yeah. No, I think that's really insightful. I mean, of course, there's some benefit to now being forced to see the church building just as a tool. But that it is at its best is it people out of their homes and into unlikely communities and unlikely relationships that have the potential to be transformative, right? It's actually that's the original calling out. That's good. It's good stuff, Vinyl Preacher. Good stuff.
Oh.
How do you be called out? How do you be called out in a time where signs all over my city say, you're safer at home. Home is your safe place. Stay home.
It's a great question. I mean, and it's hard right now, but let us not be tricked into, I'm a person who's been a pastor of a ministry that has not had a building, and I've done that for 9 years now. And there's some freedom that comes from that, but there are things we are definitely not able to do because we don't have a building that we could do.
Yeah.
A building is not the church, right? But it is a really powerful tool that we would be foolish to just say, in the future, the church won't have buildings. We'll just be home churches. So there's my rant.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good.
I mean, and I think, I think how I'd try to turn this rant into something that approaches good news. Because you have an excellent question. How do we get called out from our homes in a time when the intelligent ITS, the intelligent traffic systems, are telling us that our home is a safe place to be? Perhaps that puts us in the boat with Peter here a little bit. One of the things I really lament right now is personally my inability to connect to lots of people. That's a really fun part of my job, is to connect with lots of people who I would have no reason to connect with. I limit it for my daughter, right? Because it's a big part of the socialization going to school. We've been really particular about her going to a bilingual school where she's able to connect with people that if we stayed in our church circles, she's not going to connect to very many brown kids, right? And so we send her to a school specifically so that she can have that exposure and be connected to those people, and she's not able to do that right now. And yet, if you're twisting some good news out of it, you got to name some laments, but you can twist the good news out of it and say, hey, 2 weeks ago Peter was drowning because he had no faith. And that's literally the last thing Peter did. And Jesus is like, that's the one I want, the drowning one. That's what we're going to work with. That's what we're going to start with this one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. No, and I think that's still a powerful story that I bet the majority of your congregation is not walking around thinking about Peter that way. I remember being in college and having a professor of New Testament tell the story of Peter in like this really heartbreaking way, and realizing that like this dude was an F up in all these different ways, and that is who God chooses to build God's church on. And so it's so powerful, and it feels like old hat to us seminarians, but again, like sometimes you gotta remember that not everybody spends all their waking hours thinking about these stories. So tell that story. There are more ways to continue to tell it. And I remember I grew up at St. Peter Lutheran Church in Arlington Heights, Illinois, St. Peter Lutheran Church, and there was a giant rock, like a granite boulder on the front lawn with a plaque on it with this verse: on this rock I will build my church. Right here from Matthew. So they were very literal about that.
The other thing you can lean on as we start our campaign together to cancel Carrie Newhow, who I don't know personally in any way and have no ill will towards personally, is.
I did read his 5 pieces of technology that would be useful to you, and I was like,
That's
this
great.
is okay.
He loves a listicle.
This checklist, so he might, just.
We need to do better. Librarians are really important to our society because they can help us discern like what forms of how to identify good information and not. Is that this starts the story in a lot of ways. This isn't the spin-off show. This is the main show. We're starting in the Old Testament, and Genesis is really a prequel. It feels in a lot of ways to me like the prequel you make after the show. Like it's the Star Wars episodes 1, 2, 3. Because sometimes it's a little racist. But this story that is the main story is a story about trying to get home, but never getting there, right? Like, and if there's good news to tie a bow on this Old Testament story that starts in Exodus, it's almost like Wicked. What's the show called? Dorothy. What's the name? Dog Toto. What's the name of that movie? It's almost a little Wizard of Oz, right? You were always there. You were always home, and so that might be the good news is we're searching to, one, get back to home, but also to be a bit of a cautionary tale about glorifying faith that lives in, quote unquote, the home. So Matt, as you've been living your whole life in the home, what have you been listening to on your home stereo?
What have I got this year? Oh, yeah. So, Anthony Eder, who works for Lutheran Retreats, Camps, and Conferences. Continued prayers to them, by the way. They were evacuated because of one of our California fires out of Luther Glen. They've now gone back, so that's good news. But they had to evacuate like their animals to a local church, which is just amazing. But anyway, he for my birthday, he sends me a playlist.
What a gift!
Of like 40 songs. And the playlist is just called For Matt. It's the second time he's done this, and it's a beautiful thing. So I'm going to choose some songs from this playlist. So he's got a version of Ooh Child, but by Nina Simone. So not the 5 Stereotypes, but the famous Nina Simone. And since we're talking about these children, this is really is a story about like protecting the next generation for what that generation is going to do. So Ooh Child, yep, let's do that. When my young adults talk about, when I introduce this story to them, they go, oh, I like the Prince of Egypt movie, which is now a cultural reference point in so many ways. So the single from that movie which was originally Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey. There's been a recent cover by Cynthia Erivo and Shoshana Bean, When You Believe. So cover of When You Believe from the Prince of Egypt classic tune. I remember that.
And
movie.
Anthony put
it's
that
still,
on your
it actually
playlist.
is pretty good. It's pretty good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
For some reason. Yeah.
That's it's
great.
Deep cut.
Yeah. It's a super random playlist, but I like it. And then we've got Carole King. I think Laurel Canyon Connections.
I think so,
maybe.
Right. I think
feels like
I haven't gotten there yet in the book. But I believe her and James Taylor take a swing through the canyon.
Well, she's got a song called "Bitter with the Sweet." Maybe you could even say "Sweet with the Bitter." But all of the dualities in this story, the humor and the horror, all of it, the power of Pharaoh, the power of God, the power of this patriarchal man, the power of these women, bitter with the sweet. Let's do that.
I like it, man.
3 songs. Thanks, Anthony.
I like it. Matt, I got a little ranty on the pod and in my preparation about homes and the home. But I'm going to go with the Lumineers' Long Way From Home, because that's where, Moses and the crew find themselves at the beginning of this story. And I think it's the church that Jesus is calling us into in the Matthew reading. Jesus, who we've talked about a little bit on this podcast, in the gospel reading, he looks around the room and says, "Who do people say that I am? Who do you say that I am?" Basically what he's doing is pulling the old Beyonce move back when she was with Destiny's Child. Say my name, Matt. Say my name. Destiny's Child, we're putting it on the playlist. And finally, Matt, we need a good song about the water. We've got so many good water songs. Dawes, I don't know if you've heard about them. They're a Laurel Canyon-based band from the modern era that some people really love and are saying are great. Been around for over 10 years now. Up-and-coming band. Has a lovely song on the album Time Spent in Los Angeles that's often underlooked. And it's overlooked. It's called Moon in the Water, which is a beautiful little song. And I can hear it playing with our cinematic cut of Moses floating down the water and being pulled out. I'll always be fishing for the moon in the water.
Nice.
Is how the chorus goes. Yeah.
Ooh.
Moon in the water.
Good.
It's a beautiful song. Love it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. It's
real live streamed vinyl. We did it.